if we move on to my talk. So I'm going to give you an overview of the psychological professions and what the Psychological Professions Network can do for you. So before I discuss the benefits of being in the PPN, I'll give you some broader context. So Psychological Professions Networks are commissioned by NHS England to provide a joined-up voice for the profession. It's a free multi-professional network for anyone interested in psychological practice in the NHS. And our focus is very much on bringing people together, psychological professionals and other stakeholders, to maximise the benefits of the profession to the public. And just to quickly say, we've come a long way in quite a short time, because it was only October 2022 that NHS England appointed a national clinical lead for the psychological professions, and that's Adrian Whittington, who's also the lead for the PPN nationally. Prior to that time, psychological professionals had been grouped within allied health professions leadership structures. So Adrian's role has been vital in facilitating those developments within the workforce, and it reflects the growing presence of psychological professionals that we have in the NHS. Lawrence, is it okay if I bring you in at the end of this session?
Absolutely, yeah, fine.
Yeah, great stuff. So next slide, please, Nick. So the overarching function of the PPN is to inform, enable and influence NHS commissioned healthcare, and we do that through a range of activities, recognising that we have a stronger voice collectively. So a lot of our work focuses on advising policymakers, workforce planners and commissioners within NHS healthcare, but also we're involved in establishing and supporting people at the coalface, really, and helping people to establish communities of practice for different groups, to join people together. So we have a community of practice for psychological professionals who work in practitioner roles, which has recently started just last month. And we'd very much like to get a community of practice for aspiring psychological professionals off the ground again. We did have one historically. So if any of you on the call today who are undertaking a training course would like to be involved in that, please get in touch with us and we can help facilitate that. So we're one of 7 regional networks across England. And before I go further into the work that we do, we've got a brief video to play you on the next slide. Is the sound working for everyone?
I can't hear the sound, James.
No.
Okay, it might be best, Nick, if we stop the video. And given we're slightly late, we're slightly running behind time anyway, we'll circulate the slides. The video basically gives you an overview of the PPN and the context in which we kind of sit, really. It's worth watching. It's only about 3 minutes long. If we move on to the next slide, please, Nick. So just to give you an overview of our work, it's shaped by these 5 strategic priorities. We work to support the transformation in psychological healthcare because there's unprecedented growth ambitions. We're looking to grow the NHS psychological professions workforce by 65% over 4 years. So there's a huge growth ambition, which we support with. We support the development and communication of career paths for further development opportunities for all psychological professionals. We work to help diversify the profession. So we've got various initiatives that we run to try and make sure that the psychological professions are more representative of the communities that we serve. So we've got strands of work to support with that. In terms of leadership, I've mentioned the presence of a national clinical lead. We're working with colleagues across integrated care systems to ensure that there's regional leadership and then also local leadership within NHS trusts that's going to support the growth that we're aiming for. So some of you might be aware that these leadership roles in NHS trusts called Chief Psychological Professions Officers. So they're kind of at the top of a leadership pyramid within NHS trusts. And finally, we have the priority to transform. So we support this in various ways. Communities of practice are a good way for us to help transform healthcare, to share good practice and for people to connect with like-minded individuals and build relationships. I mentioned the aspiration to have an aspiring psychological practitioners community of practice again. So please let us know if that's of interest, because it just helps you to share knowledge and skills and exchange other sort of thoughts around developments within the professions. Next slide, please, Nick. So we have 5 vision statements as well, which is shown on this slide. I won't go into detail around those, but those essentially align with the higher levels of workforce priorities that we have. Ultimately, we want to see NHS healthcare that's completely psychologically informed, with psychological practice being at the heart of healthcare. And when you think about that, it's quite a paradigm shift away from mental healthcare and physical healthcare being seen as distinct from one another. So, we believe as a PPN, there should be seamless integration of these areas. And, that is kind of the aspiration that we have, to introduce much more psychology into physical healthcare settings. I think some of our speakers today will give you a real life illustration of that in the work that they do. If we move on to the next slide, please. I won't go into detail about who we are, but we're kind of quite a broad team, but it looks like there's quite a lot of us, but in reality, we're all part-time, with the leadership fellows only doing half a day a week. Our chair does 2 days a week as the chair, but has lots of other hats that she wears as well. So we're a small team covering a wide area. We've got 40 NHS trusts, 11 integrated care systems, and over 100 higher education institutions. So it's a big area. And of course, our work's informed by experts by experience as well. Next slide, please. I think we'll miss this slide out. If we go straight on to the next one, I've touched on the workforce expansion ambitions. I wanted to just briefly touch on the career map. So this is something that we have on the PPN website. So hopefully some of you will be members and may have seen this on our website. It's basically an interactive map that gives you an overview of all of the emerging roles within the psychological professions taxonomy, of which there's over 20 plus roles now, split into 3 broad categories. If we move on to the next slide, please, Nick. So using the careers map, you can click on each individual role, or you can click on your current qualification to see what roles you could be working towards based on where you are in your educational journey. It's a really good resource to use. Again, we've got lots of links within the slide deck that we're presenting today, so we will share that afterwards and encourage you to go and have a look through some of the links in there. If we move on to the next slide, please, Nick. Now, within the slide deck, I won't go into detail because we're running a little bit behind, but there's an overview of the 3 different categories of role within the slide deck. So we have psychological practitioners, of which we have a couple of colleagues joining us today to talk through their roles as mental health and wellbeing practitioners. So there's some general information there about the practitioner level roles. And again, you can find out more on the careers map. If we move through to the next slide, this is just around the psychological therapist grouping. This is a more complicated grouping because, for example, to be employed as a counsellor within the NHS, you need to have completed a degree recognised by the BPS and then be registered with a body accredited by the Professional Standards Authority. And there's quite a few different accrediting and membership bodies. Again, the PPN careers map is helpful to kind of help you identify how to navigate through that a little. But also there's a link within the slides there to the scoped framework, which is essentially a piece of work that a number of different bodies did to try and align where the different accrediting bodies sit against each other. So if you're looking for a career as a therapist, then that would be a useful thing to look at. And if we move on to the next slide, please, Nick. The final grouping is that of psychologists. So that includes clinical, counselling, forensic and health psychologists, who are collectively referred to as practitioner psychologists. There's differences regarding entry requirements for each of those roles. Again, there's some information on this slide with some links that you can click on, but also looking through the careers map and looking at the different psychologist roles would be beneficial if that's your career ambition. If we could skip the next, well, we go to the next slide actually. I'll just briefly touch on this. This is the clinical associate in psychology role. I'll just briefly touch on this because it's a relatively new but very fast growing role, because it kind of bridges the gap between clinical or practitioner psychologists and assistant psychologists. So it's an apprenticeship route where psychological practitioners are under the supervision of a qualified psychologist for around 18 months during their apprenticeship, but then also when they're in post within their particular kind of service area. And they work with specific populations depending on the route, the training route that they've taken and the course that they've taken. But you know, working with people who've got long-standing and complex problems. So working within a very narrow scope, but quite a deep breadth of psychological practice. So it's an interesting new role, which is aligned to clinical psychologists. And I think that's quite an exciting kind of area of growth within the profession. If we skip the next slide, please, Nick. And yeah, that's great. So in terms of just selling why it's important for you to be a member of the PPN, I think the question to ask really is why not be a member? We're a free network. We can connect you with, you know, the regional networks of psychological professionals and also national networks. The national conference that we have every year, you'll be informed about that. Informed about the things that we do regionally with communities of practice and other groups and events that we hold. So please register. The details are there on that slide. If we move to the final slide, please. So I won't take any questions at this point because we are running slightly late. That's just some of our data there around our activity since we started 3 years ago. So there's quite a few members that we have across the Midlands, which is continually growing. And I think at this point, if I bring you in, Lawrence, would you like to give an overview of the BPS?
Brilliant. Thank you. And I understand we're running late, so everything's a bit squashed together. Really, I was only going to just a couple of minutes. Firstly, just to say I'm co-chair of the West Mids BPS branch. But really, echo what James just said. I'm a member of the PPN. I get the newsletters. They're really helpful. The world out there with all these different roles is very complicated, and these people, the PPN is a really good source of information. If you're thinking about a future in healthcare, and I'm a retired clinical psychologist by background, then it's a great place to be. The BPS branch, of course, covers not only the psychologists working in the NHS, but much more broadly. So I just wanted to flag that up briefly about what we do. So the branch for the West Midlands has got about 6,000 members. What we aim to do is to bring together psychologists across the whole of the region, share ideas and expertise, new psychological ideas within the region. Key things for us are challenging lack of diversity in psychology and trying to develop that. So we've got a very active branch here in the West Mids, so working in conjunction with the PPN. About 6,000 members, about a third undergraduates, a third postgraduates, and a third of them in one of the divisions of clinical psychology. But remember, we connect across not only the healthcare bit that the PPN talks about, but organizational psychology, sports and exercise psychology, lectures in psychology. So it's kind of the broader ways you might want to use your expertise that you develop doing an undergraduate degree in psychology here. I think, again, it's a slight advert for if you want to join the branch. We do things like we have a monthly newsletter with really interesting varied papers. We run an annual conference, which is free, which we alternate between East Midlands and West Midlands. We have bursaries and grants, and we also have student ambassadors who join us. So the PPN focuses on psychology and healthcare. Brilliant. We work alongside them and do events like this, careers events. But if your psychology takes you to a different area of psychology, or about the way you might use your psychology, even if you're doing marketing or business or management, then again, the BPS is a good thing to link into. And I believe if you're on a BPS accredited course, you can have a year's free membership. So if you are an undergraduate, join the PPN, join the BPS for at least a year and see what's going on, and use us and the PPN to help you to think about careers. So that was really all I wanted to flag up. This is a great event. I'm sorry time is squeezed, but we've got some great speakers, so I'll shut up and let them get on with the interesting stuff. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Lawrence. And just to confirm to you all that the session is being recorded this afternoon. So please don't put your screen on if you don't want to be included on that. And I guess it's better for people to keep their screens off until we get to a period where we're asking or answering questions. So keep your cameras off during the presentations. So now I'll hand over to Mohammed, who's going to give us his experiences working as an assistant psychologist with older adults in Birmingham. So Mohammed, over to you.
Hello guys, thanks for the introduction, James. I think just following the process as everybody before, if you've got any questions, just leave them to the end, and if you've got time, we'll try to answer them. So yeah, my name's Mohammed. I'm an assistant psychologist working within Birmingham and Solihull NHS Trust. Next slide, please. So in terms of the contents for my sort of slides and what I'll be talking about, I'll talk about kind of the education route that I've taken, and then I'll kind of dwell into some of my experiences and kind of just finish off with kind of how I got here. Next slide, please. So in terms of experience, I'll just start off with kind of secondary school. So kind of went down the route of doing my GCSEs. I got 7 kind of A star to C. That included kind of the basic, social sciences, the maths, English, and a few other subjects. And then I guess, yeah, following on from this, I was trying to follow the route of going down medicine. So I started off my 6th form by doing retakes. And I think that those retakes were, again, just trying to kind of look at where my career pathway was, and it's just kind of thinking, it's about parents wanting you to become a doctor sort of thing. So I was like, right, I'll do my retakes, but yeah, kind of realized that the science side wasn't for me. So Well, I did worse in the retext than I did the year before, but obviously the motivation wasn't there. And then the year after, I kind of took the A levels in RE and IT, and I did a level 3 in business studies. None of them kind of were similar in any way. But then I think as I got towards the end of my college, so in the second year, it kind of was a moment of reflection for me, kind of what is it that I want to do, which is probably where you guys are now as well, thinking, well, what pathway do I want to take? So that was a moment of reflection for me. And I guess for me, what stood out was I wanted to kind of give back to the community, make a change in society. And obviously that's something that's quite significant to me, and it's, you know, to look after society sort of thing. So then I went down the route of pursuing a degree in psychology and criminology, and I graduated with a 2-1 in the degree. Next slide, please. So in terms of experience, I started off in 2017. That was my first role, I believe, during my undergraduate, and I was working as a kind of support worker at a care home, and this was kind of the foundation for building on my experiences. So down here, I was kind of understanding the psychology within adolescence. So I was working with children and adolescents with a diagnosis of autism and additional needs. And I could kind of see the link between the attachment difficulties. You know, it kind of gave me an insight into, or reminiscing to kind of my teens as well. It's, you know, the identity sort of thing, trying to fit in, the barriers, and you know, some of the kind of difficulties really of being or living in care, and but also kind of just thinking about perhaps, you know, failures within the care home systems as well. So it was a really interesting job role for me. So I did that for about 2 years, and then I moved on to well, tell a lie. Before I kind of moved on, that was basically before I graduated from my undergrad. So I thought, yep, I've got experience in a care home. And you know, I've got my undergraduate degree. I'm going to get my first AP role, but yeah, it was kind of knocked back a few times. And then I thought, well, I need to kind of change my attitude and think, well, what is it that I need to do in order to get my AP role? So then I began to look about, you know, some of the things that they're looking for. So, you know, some of the skills of a clinical psychologist is working in a hospital setting, working in a clinical environment, working as part of an MDT. So then that took me on to kind of working as a support worker within Signet Healthcare. Again, the client population group here was autism and learning disabilities, but now I was working with adults. And this role, I stayed in here for about a year. And again, this was like a stepping stone for me in hope of getting an AP role as well. But I was kind of providing dignified care and just understanding the complexities of autism and learning disabilities, and kind of thinking about or seeing the variation between somebody who has like a mild learning disability to more the severe, and then just thinking about kind of the importance of person-centered care. And then I applied for, I mean, at this point I was applying for AP roles, and then I think there's an opportunity which came about as an assistant educational psychologist. So I applied there. And then I think when this was, whilst I was still in the support worker at Signet Healthcare, and then in the last week when I was just about to go to this new place, an opportunity came for an AP at the hospital I was working at. So I applied for that as well. So then I basically stayed in the educational role for about a month, but then obviously went back to the AP role at the hospital because I felt that was more inclined or better for my development. within the AP role at Signet Healthcare, I had it was fantastic. How I got the role, I'll talk about that in the next slide. But there was lots of opportunities. I was engaging in kind of formulation work. I was doing a lot of psychometrics, outcome measures. It was thinking about kind of attending meetings. So this was, I guess, opening my horizons to the different types of meetings. So from CPA meetings, these are care plan approach meetings, discussing the care of patients. I was kind of thinking about adapting materials to ease communication and the importance of communication, and often how aggression can be a form of communication. So sometimes it can manifest in aggression, sort of thing. I was also running therapy groups. I was adapting materials, etc. And then I think this was about almost 2 years ago. I came into my current role as an assistant psychologist at the NHS Trust, and here I'm working with older adults. So this is where I am now. I'm working with older adults. And I'm kind of doing formulation work. So this is more kind of the CBT, CFT. I'm also doing kind of neurological assessments. There's also kind of room for kind of service delivery. There's also rooms to kind of do some service evaluations as well. So it's really, there's been a lot of kind of the depth and the breadth of experience that I've obtained. And whilst it sounds like it's been an easy journey, there's been, I think, a lot of roller coasters. And I think it's also important to mention that the AP role that I'm in now, I actually applied for that before I got the role at Signet Healthcare. So when I came for the interview 2 years later, I mentioned that. And I think that's what helped me as well get the role that I'm in now. I showed the importance of resilience and mentioned how I've applied before, and I was told that I need to develop further as a clinician and think about increasing my sort of experience. So I think that also worked in my favour, and it's also something or advice that I'd give to new students as well is also showing the kind of the dedication to the cause. Yeah, next slide, please. Last slide, that's me just trying to stand out from the crowd. Got my hands up in the air. So how did I get to where I am now and where I want to be? So it is all about kind of resilience and perseverance. And I've mentioned the commitment to patient care, and then I've said chasing down the psychologist. And that's basically reminding me about the role that I had at Signet Healthcare. So when I was there as a support worker, I think the first couple of weeks I was literally looking for the psychologist and saying, look, I'm an newly undergraduate and I'm looking for psychology experience, and I'm looking for an AP role. Yeah, I think they were probably traumatized by the amount of times I was kind of chasing them down, but they were actually, so when I came for the interview time, it was the same psychologist doing my interview, and they said that's one of the reasons why they recruited me was just because of my dedication, and they could see the kind of the significance of that role for me. So I think, yeah, so that's one thing is quite important. And then the perseverance is, it's not easy getting your first AP role. I think it's important to acknowledge that as well. So for me, it took me a full year of applying before I got my first AP role. And that's not the case with everybody, but I think it's important to acknowledge that because it's about your understanding and your kind of reflections really on your experiences. And that was something that I wasn't good at, and it's something that I built over time. So, when you are applying for roles, you say you've done this, but what have you learned from it? How has it changed you as a clinician? So it's just thinking about those sort of conversations or those sort of skills really when you're applying for roles. And then where do I want to be? So I think in terms of my aspirations, I want to be a clinical psychologist. So like many of yous, I'm at the moment I'm applying for the doctorate program, and this is my sort of vision, really. And that's just down to my own experiences. I think, as James was saying at the beginning, there's so many different routes. So, you know, it's important to also mention that you don't just get kind of tied down thinking, you know, the route towards being within psychology is getting AP roles or PWP roles, and then becoming a clinical psychologist. I think James also mentioned about capsules as well, but there's so many more roles that are developing over time, and the PPN has all the information about that. So I guess just to finish off, I think in terms of advice or kind of in terms of like signposting and stuff, is keeping your options open, really. And it's just thinking, when you are applying for roles, what is it that you want to gain, and where do you see yourself in the future? I think that's very important, and that's a question that I always ask myself, because if you just want to practice therapy and you don't really want like the leadership side, or you don't want to do the supervision side, then the capsule might be appealing towards you. But I'm hoping I'm not tapping into anybody else's field. But I just thought I'll just give some friendly advice. It's really important, given that, you know, you're coming out of uni and you're not sure where to go. I'm not sure if I've got any time for questions, James, or do we just have to skip past it?
Yes, I kind of I think we've caught up a bit of time. I mean, if anyone has got any specific questions, maybe raise your hand and we could take them now. I thought that was a fabulous overview there, Mohammed, and I think there's so much to be said for, you know, for standing out, being seen, being enthusiastic, and being determined. And you know, clearly that's what you've done, and that's enabled you to get where you are now, and hopefully your journey will continue. Okay, let's move on to Katie and Pablo, who are both mental health practitioners. Thanks again, Lauren. I think Lauren's going to stick around if we do have any questions for her for later. But over to you, Pablo.
I'll be speaking first.
Actually,
I
think
right,
you're going
okay,
first.
Sorry. Okay, Katie.
It's all right. So I'm Katie. I'm a mental health and wellbeing practitioner working in adult community mental health based in Handsworth here in Birmingham. So what that means is that I deliver wellbeing focused, psychologically informed CBT interventions to adults with a wide variety of severe mental health difficulties. Next slide, please. So the MHWP role was introduced as part of the NHS 5-year plan to strengthen the workforce and improve service users' experiences of mental health services. From this plan and different service user feedback since then, several key themes were identified, including that every service user has a right to be seen as a whole person without stigmatism and not just a diagnosis, to be involved in decisions about their care and have their voice heard, to have hope and choices that are based around their goals, and to have improved access to a range of psychological interventions and support. These themes essentially encompass the MHWP role. It's still relatively new, so I qualified last year and was part of the second cohort in the country and the first in Birmingham, but the role continues to develop rapidly and is really becoming a prominent service within the NHS and within psychological services. Next slide, please. So what does the MHWP working with adults and severe mental health difficulties look like? So what you are seeing on screen are the key aspects of what we do. So initially we carry out assessments, which is really a way for us to get to know the service user, covering what their main mental health difficulties are and different factors surrounding this, as well as risk assessments, and ending with their goals, what they would like to achieve, either working with us or just working with mental health services as a whole. We then use these goals and different information from assessment to inform their care plan, which is created collaboratively with the service user, because they are the experts when it comes to themselves and so should be involved in their care. And depending on what we decide from the care plan, I will either then refer the service user to the appropriate service or take them on as part of my caseload for MHWP intervention, which I'll tell you a little bit more about in a moment. As well as assessment, intervention and care planning, I also work as part of a multidisciplinary team made up of psychiatric doctors, mental health nurses, occupational therapists, support workers, and different psychologists who meet several times a week to discuss anybody under our service and make team decisions as appropriate. With all of this, I'm very much based at the hub and with clients coming to see me here for face-to-face appointments. However, being community care, I do also do home appointments where appropriate, and I'm able to carry out phone and video calls as well. Next slide, please. So what you're looking at right now is a typical day for me at the moment. So I have a caseload of 8 people who I see for weekly intervention appointments, and then I also do 2 assessment appointments a week. On top of this, I'll also attend MDT at least once a week and have all sorts of different meetings and monthly supervisions. So it's not always full days of appointments. It's also really important to have protected reading time where you literally read up on different things related to your interventions and psychology in general, because our brains are our only tool. So we need to keep it fresh and always learning. So to do this, I also have a working from home day once a week where I can read and catch up on any of the admin or create resources and different things like that. Next slide, please. So these are the 7 core MHWP interventions that you are trained to carry out with service users. So behavioural activation is targeted at those presenting with depression who are struggling to make behavioural changes and find motivation to do so. So during this intervention, you'll literally do what it says. So you help your client to establish activity goals and work their way towards them with a focus on building a sense of enjoyment and achievement into every day to help boost that low mood. Recognising and managing emotions is suitable for those who are struggling with inappropriate or intense emotions such as anger, anxiety, sadness, guilt or shame. During this intervention, you work with clients to help them to learn first how to recognise how they are feeling and what it means for them, and then to be able to manage that emotion by validating it, but not letting it control through changes in behaviour. Graded exposure is suitable for those with anxiety related to a specific fear, such as social anxiety, fear of leaving the house, or even a fear of spiders. So with this one, you will have facing their fear as the ultimate goal, and then break down that goal into more manageable steps related to their level of anxiety, and then work with them to gradually build up to facing that top level fear while learning that they can cope with the anxiety at the same time. Building confidence is for those who are struggling with confidence or low self-esteem and have negative beliefs or thoughts about themselves. So this one works very similarly to behavioural activation, where you set goals based around what they would like to achieve in terms of facing what is making them feel that lack of confidence. And then you work with them to achieve those goals by practicing scenarios or completing activities that align with their strengths and values. And then we have improving sleep, which helps people to gain skills to improve their quality of sleep, which has a huge impact on mental health for, I think, every service user I've worked with so far. Problem solving is an intervention that is skills based and can help with barriers to engagement. So this one can be a standalone intervention, but it can also be used as part of any of the other interventions as well. And then we have guided self-help for bulimia and binge eating, which is targeted to help those with bulimia or binge eating who don't have access to the eating disorder services. Now, which intervention that you carry out with your client depends on their goals. As I work in secondary care, I work with people with a wide range of mental health diagnoses and comorbidities, but as we know, mental health difficulties go beyond just the diagnosis. Clients may also have difficulties that fit one of these interventions, but they're just not ready to work on that yet, and that's okay. So this is where that collaborative care planning will come in to decide what is best for the client's needs, whether that be one of these interventions or a referral elsewhere. All of these interventions are taught with a set structure over 9 sessions, but they are very adaptable to meet the client's individual needs, and you can really find your own style of how you interact with the client and deliver them to them. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the training to become an MHWP is a combination of university training and clinical practice. So you're employed full-time by the NHS and will typically have 2 days of university teaching per week and then 3 days in the workplace each week, where you'll work alongside a psychology supervisor and case management supervisor, as well as all the other supportive colleagues within your team. Over the year, you will complete different academic assignments and have to meet requirements for hours of clinical practice for both MHWP assessment and their interventions as well. Upon successful qualification, you will then continue into a full-time MHWP role. As this is a developmental role, there are not strictly any essential qualifications or clinical experience needed to apply, but I would definitely say that some form of experience working with mental health is desirable. So as an example, my background is that I studied forensic psychology at undergraduate and postgraduate level, and then I worked for about a year in a children's residential home as a support worker. So I didn't have any clinical experience, but I did have experience of working with people with mental health difficulties and challenging behaviours. However, However, other members of my cohort for training had very different backgrounds. So we had people who were nurses and working in social services, working in social housing. And there was also a mixture of ages and educational backgrounds as well, with some people not having gone to university before. So the role really is open to anybody who wants to apply. Once you qualify, you'll then receive either a postgraduate certificate or an undergraduate certificate, depending on whether or not you already have an undergraduate qualification. And you will then get enough experience from doing this role that you can then progress into training to be a CBT therapist or even a trainee clinical psychologist, if that's what your end goal is. Next slide, please. Right, so to finish off, I couldn't think of a better way to explain what I find most rewarding than showing you all some quotes taken from my actual clients that I've worked with over the last year. So these were all such big achievements and milestone moments for the clients, and majority of them aren't even directly related to their overall goals. So they're really moments that are wholesome and rewarding to experience, and honestly makes it all worth it. We're just a piece of somebody's mental health journey, but both the work that we do and just the relationships that we build really do make such a difference to their lives on their way to reaching their goal. But yes, that's it for me. But my colleague Pablo has some things to tell you about the MHMP role from his side as well.
Great, thanks, Katie. What I was going to try and do, so Katie's given such a fabulous overview of the role that I'm going to try and sort of fill in some gaps about how my one sort of differs a little bit. I am based down in Sussex on the coast, and I work in an older people's service. So can you, next slide, please? So it's a dementia and older persons mental health services, but we don't really get to work that much with dementia just because you need to have a sort of certain level of cognitive ability to do our interventions. But it's interesting. When I first got the chance to work with older people, I wasn't really sure, and I think that is actually something that's quite common with people first getting into psychology, and it shouldn't, basically, is all I'll say. Older people can be so much more receptive to support. I had to do a bit of working age stuff as well during my training. Older people are a lot less chaotic. They turn up for all the appointments and things like this, and so they can really make changes from the stuff that we do. And something that I think is interesting as well is it is going to be a key specialism over the next however many years, because of the number of older people that there's going to be, the proportion of our population that's going to be older. So my background is a little bit different to most people who've spoken today. I am 40 this year. I have 2 daughters, so I'm a little bit older than some of the other speakers. But then obviously I'm speaking to some people I work with are like 80 or nearly 90. So am I old? I don't know. But I was older than the rest of my cohort when I got onto the MHWP training. I had 10 years in digital communications before I decided to switch careers. And after I did my psychology conversion, I did it distance learning while I was living in Singapore. But that's another story. So I like everyone else, probably came out of the psychology thinking, right, I'm going to get an AP role, and that was very tricky. And I think that's probably something that other people are going to see when they come out. And I just so happened that they started launching this MHWP training as I was doing some volunteer stuff and some healthcare assistant work on a psychiatric ward. And I think a combination of my sort of life experience and the amount of volunteer work that I could show that I was really interested in this, and then I had my academic stuff with the masters, they were persuaded to get me on there. I mean, similar to what some other people today have said, just getting into any space where you are in front of people who are going through mental health difficulties and seeing how you react, see how other professions work in those environments is invaluable, not just for yourself and your own learning, but if you're in interviews, you can talk a lot more intelligently about how it all works if you've been in there, even if it is as a volunteer or HCA or whatever. Next slide, please. I've given a really loose working day here. I guess I wanted to sort of show how mine is slightly different to Katie's, maybe because I work with only older adults, and there's a lot more. We basically only do home visits, so there's a lot more driving, which Some people might be a benefit. Some people might, I don't know. I like it. Gives me a bit of time on the way to the appointment to really sort of start to think about how I'm going to talk to this person and how I'm going to run the assessment, or how I'm going to work with them on the intervention we've chosen. And so you probably will only do 2 appointments a day, maybe 3 appointments if you've got nothing else planned. But outside of that, you have the MDT and you have your supervision and you have your training and everything. And I don't know, for me, that mixes up the week nicely. So you're not just going from one patient to the next, to the next, to the next, because you are giving a lot of yourself in those sessions. And so to be able to have meetings and trainings and a bit more sort of you time is good. I think others have mentioned the MDT. I think that's incredible experience to be able to be part of an MDT and to hear different people's perspectives. The way that they're training will make them talk about patients and think about what's appropriate for that patient is really interesting. So once you've got your 2 or 3 appointments done, you write that up on the notes system, and you know that there's often, you might find after you've come out of the session, there's a niggling little question, so you can speak to the other members of the MDT, speak to the lead practitioner, and sort of kind of try and that's one of the things actually about the MDT. It's about sharing the risk, because often you can be the only person who's going out to see this person, and if you're seeing them deteriorate, or if you're seeing them say something a bit unusual, then you don't want it to feel like it's just you. It can be quite stressful if you feel like it's just you, when actually it's a whole team that's looking after these people. Yeah, that's generally how my day goes. And next slide, please. So I love my job. So I'm probably a bit of an evangelist on this. So I thought I'd just run through a few things that I like most. Obviously there is there's benefits and there's advantages and disadvantages. I think especially if you're comparing it to an AP role, and something that I don't think has been mentioned today is if you do the MHWP role, you are committed to not apply for another Health Education in England funded role. So I, for instance, can't apply for the doctorate for another year or so, because you need to wait 2 years from when you qualify. So that's worth bearing in mind. However, if you're happy to accept that you're going to be doing this sort of work for a couple of years, there is this opportunity to get in front of people day in, day out, be trained in evidence-based interventions. You're going in there and really making a difference. Almost always you first go in and you see someone really distressed and you think, God, how are these quite relatively simple interventions? How are they going to pull this person out of it? And yet more often than not, you see these results and it's fabulous. As Katie said, some of the things they say and the way you see them transform in front of your eyes is really special. The second one, that's one of the things I like most about it, is kind of the intellectual challenge during the assessment, because someone can be referred to you for almost always depression and anxiety, like it's just just standard, and yet when you talk to them, you have to be a bit of a detective to sort of think, okay, what is the behavior that's either brought this on or that's maintaining it, or how are the different factors within their life or their background interacting to create the situation that they're in right now? Why are they not able to get out of this situation themselves, and what can we do with our interventions to help them, to support them? Because as Katie said, it's a very patient-centered approach where they are doing it. We are only supporting. And speaking of supporting, it's really special being part of the NHS. It can be a really challenging place to be, obviously. It's quite a strange culture in parts, but like the people are wonderful. Everybody wants to help each other. There's a lot of very skilled people around you, and you will learn tons and tons every day. And including, so my fourth point on here is about supervision by a psychologist. I think the previous iteration of this role, you weren't always being supervised by a psychologist. This one, they've made it crucial that it's either a CBT therapist or a psychologist. So, for anyone who wants to go down that sort of route, it's great to be, every other week or whatever it is, getting the advice and the sort of nurturing from a skilled professional. And then I've put on there at the end independence. This can be quite important. Some people, you can sort of plan your own week. You book in your sessions. If you want to do 3 sessions in a row, 2 days in a row, and then have a day at home to do all the admin, that's kind of on you. And yeah, I think that's quite an advantage. Very conscious of time. So last slide, please. So this is I just wanted to mention this because obviously I've been banging on about how great this role is, and but obviously it's not for everyone. So I think there's a few things on here to kind of ask yourself. Probably the first 2 are the most important. One is, can you sit with someone else's distress? Can you sit there while somebody is in crisis or crying or saying that they're going to do things to themselves? How would you react to that? And if you can be someone who can be there with them and speak to them without necessarily knowing exactly what the right thing is to say, then it could be a good role for you. The second one is about empathizing, but keeping emotional distance, which it's easier said than done, but like you need to be able to care for them and back them and hold the hope for them, but at the same time keep a little distance. Otherwise it can be, they're quite heavy emotions involved. You need to look after yourself. The third one there, be comfortable not knowing what will happen in a session. Like we spend ages planning our sessions, say this is exactly what I'm going to say in this session, this is what I'm going to ask him, and then you get in there and it just does not go to plan at all, and that's part of the enjoyment of the role. But obviously that's not for everyone. If you want to have a predictable day, then this isn't ideal. If you want to be intellectually challenged, if you want to be emotionally challenged, and for it to be varied and everything, this could be a really great role for you. The fourth one is one that's you will learn, but it's about you're basically following a structured intervention. So it's kind of a bit of a formula for how you do these things. But, and I've heard this from lots of patients, the way that you will sell it is by adapting it for that person in front of you. If you just read out things on a sheet, then no one's going to listen. But if you're tapping into that person in front of you and seeing which bits they understand and working with them on each factor, then can be a real success. And the final one, again, this is something you'll learn, but I found this really important, and it's just worth knowing as you go in. Can you talk openly about your mistakes and learn from them? Can you go into your supervision with your psychologist and say, wow, I made a real mess of this last week, and I'm going to tell you, or I'm going to share the recording of me making a mess of this, but knowing that is the way you're going to learn from it and be a much better psychological practitioner and develop your career. So that's hopefully that can be of use to people. Thank you.
Thanks, Casey and Pablo. Great presentations. Interesting to hear about your different routes into being an MHWP and how the same role works within different settings. Thanks, Pablo, for mentioning the 2-year role. So that applies to any NHS England funded training. And I'll also confirm that someone in their 50s, 40 is not old. So yeah, thanks again. That was really interesting presentation. We were going to play a video of a clinical associate in psychology. We weren't able to identify someone to speak in person, but given the timing and the issue we had with the previous video, I think it's probably best if we move straight on to hear from Christiana, who's going to give us some information about practice placements in Birmingham and Solihull.
Thank you, James. Hi, everyone. I'm Christiana Akinfolarin. I'm a practice placement manager at Birmingham and Solihull Mental Health Foundation Trust. It is indeed a privilege to be here to talk to you about the placement opportunities that we currently have in the trust. I'll be very brief. I think I've just got 5 minutes, so I'll get right into it. Next slide, please. So at the moment, of course, we recruit into honorary assistant psychologist position in the trust. We recruit undergraduate and MSci students. For undergraduate students, these are students that are currently undertaking a sandwich program that have completed their 2nd year, and usually this placement starts at about September period. And students can choose to work within 4 to 5 days, and the placement typically lasts about 40 to 42 weeks, which is also dependent on the criteria of the university the student is coming in from. For MSci psychology students, we usually recruit around mid-October, and these are students in their 4th year. They do 3 days a week on placement, and they also have some study days. Placement typically lasts about 6 months for such students. Next slide, please. At the moment, we are currently in the process of interviewing for honorary assistant psychology positions. I know some of your students have recently also applied into these roles. So what we do is, of course, we identify stakeholders. We have some stakeholders that we currently have established relationship with. Even we are still in the process of also expanding our reach. We check for suitable placement opportunities at service areas, and we develop the vacancy document. Afterwards, then we send this document, we upload it on the track system. This is something we just started doing for the first time this year. I know before now, they used to just send the advert link to the schools, to the universities, but now everything is going on track system. So we have this link embedded into the track system, and then we send it to the universities. We advise that placement team send this link to their students to apply. I know some of the challenges that we recently faced is that we're not sure. Some of the applications we received, we weren't sure if students were undergoing a sandwich course or not, because it wasn't clear-cut in the application. So these are some of the things that we're taking learning from, and we'll be asking the placement team of universities to ensure that these are clear in the application that we receive, because we receive applications from students that are not undergoing a sandwich course, so they are not eligible to kind of go on a placement, to take on a placement year. So as soon as we've identified eligible students, then these people are shortlisted to go on the interview stage. And we expect that the candidates, of course, will confirm their availability to attend the interview as appropriate, and the recruiting managers will then conduct the interviews and appoint successful candidates and send out honorary contract letters. Next slide, please. These are ways that as a trust, we support the recruitment, retention, and progression of psychological professionals. So we recruit into the roles of honorary assistant psychologist, we recruit into the roles of assistant psychologist, some of the roles that have been mentioned by James and others that have presented today. We recruit into the roles of mental health and wellbeing practitioners, psychological wellbeing practitioners, and other people that are on doctorate program. So that is what we have from the trust on placement. Thank you. Over to you, James.
Thanks very much, Christiana. That was really useful. Okay, well, we've reached the end of the presentations we've had for this afternoon. Has anyone got any questions before we close? I think we still have all of our speakers with us.
Hi there.
Liana, do you want to? Yeah.
I just wanted to ask, so I am due to graduate with a master's in child psychology. I have some experience in education through conducting speech and language interventions. When applying for postgrad roles, how relevant is it to include previous work experiences that are not related to psychology, for example, hospitality?
Ooh, I think from my perspective, I would say including work experience or volunteering experience that's relevant to the role that would probably hold more value than hospitality and that kind of thing. But I'd focus on the areas that are going to score you the most points, as it were, with the recruiting panel in terms of experience and knowledge. I don't know whether any of the presenters on the call would like to chip in with any of their thoughts.
I mean, just one thing. Oh, sorry, yeah, you go.
Sorry, no, carry on. If you okay, I'll carry on. I guess for me, it's quite important. I don't know if you follow. There was a YouTube channel, and the guy was he had like an AP sort of platform. Name was Abdi, and he was saying about how he got onto the doctorate program, and his only experience was working at Pizza Hut, and what he said was, it's not about the role that you've got, but it's your reflections. So what did you get out of that role that you can relate to the field of psychology? So, you know, if you can relate that role, I think that's just as important as well. If you can relate it to the job role that you're applying for, and what you took from that role. I'm not sure if that's helpful. Yeah.
That's
a really
very helpful.
Insightful view, Mohammed. Yeah, thanks for that. I think Sharon has posted some information in the chat. So Katie has rather about the advice BCU would give, and you know, going to Katie and her colleagues may well be the best place. So I've got a number of hands up now. If I go through those in order, we've got Liana first.
Hi. So can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm a second year student. I'm currently studying psychology and criminology. For a very long time, I've been looking for placements, but I've been finding it increasingly hard to find some. So really, I'm just looking for some advice as to where the best places to look for placements would be, because it is something that I'm really interested in.
Okay, thanks for that. I think Mohammed, would you like to start with that, and maybe Christiana might be able to give some views on that as well.
In terms of placement, James, I think it would probably be better for Christiana or from the university themselves, because they're talking about placements. If it was around roles, I could give a bit of advice. But yeah, I think Christiana might be better at answering this question.
Yes, thank you, Mohammed. We do have contacts of some people from your university, and we have sent. Usually, what we do is we send them the link so that they can circulate it to the students, and the students can use the link to apply. And of recent, we did that, and we have received quite a number of applications from your students, even though at the moment, the vacancy advert has closed, because we'll soon be interviewing sometime next month, first week in March. So we do receive a lot of students. We do offer placement opportunities to a lot of students from Birmingham City University.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Christiana. Okay, we have Benita next.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hi, sorry, mine's just a quick question. I'm the same as Nicole. I'm doing my master's as well in child psychology, but my experiences, like I have experience in like residential setting and like homeless setting, but my experience wouldn't be based in the UK. So would that kind of affect me? Because I've noticed that sometimes even applying for kind of jobs in this role, they do expect you to have UK based like job specs that you've already worked.
Christiana, is that something you could answer?
Yes, I was just about to type in. I saw a similar question also in the chat. So whilst having a related work experience could be an advantage, you know, it is not necessarily an essential criteria for you to get a placement opportunity with us in the trust. Does that answer your question?
So the location, it doesn't matter where you've done the work, is like it's just an advantage.
No, it wouldn't matter where you did your work experience, but if you have related experience, it's an advantage, but usually not an essential criteria.
Right, thank you.
Okay, thanks. And now we have Reshmail.
Hi, as you've mentioned earlier that you can get the student psychologist role if somebody has secured a position, or for example, if they've secured the position for an honorary AP role. How do we get the student psychologist role? Do we have to talk to our managers or supervisors, or how do we apply for that?
I'll come in there again, James.
Yeah.
So as an honorary assistant psychologist, of course, that means you're still currently undergoing your program in the university. So you'd have had to have completed that degree before you can then apply for assistant psychologist role as they come up. So it's not an automatic transition from being an honorary assistant psychologist into becoming an assistant psychologist. Does that?
No, I'm talking about the student psychologist role, the band 3. I just saw that in one of the slides that you showed that you take the placement students for the student psychologist roles that are band 3 paid roles.
Oh, those ones are student psychologists that can register with our temporary staffing solutions.
Oh, okay.
Yes. So when you get when you get in the trust as an honorary assistant psychologist, there's also an opportunity for you to register with our temporary staffing solution on the bank, where you can then do some additional work and get paid. Because of course we know that the honorary assistant psychologist is not a paid role, it's not a paid position. So you can then get on the bank to do some additional work.
Oh, okay, that's fine. Thank you.
Okay, if we go to Maria.
Hi, I hope you can hear me okay. My main question is because I'm on the master's conversion course. So I worked for 5 years, but I worked in marketing, so it's different. So my main question is about finding kind of on the paid work experience / job opportunities, and like as you're transitioning from one career into another, like where to find some paid opportunities that would give you some sort of like face-to-face experience, even if it's not like specifically a like clinical setting, but something that would give you some sort of mental health experience, and finding some sort of paid opportunity within that transition. Because I feel like I not being able being able to have a job or doing something entirely unrelated and kind of like dipping in and out of it, as lovely as that is, I think it would be, if I had the opportunity and you kind of like had a better idea of the kind of things you could apply for in like kind of that in between phase, so I left with more experience at the end of my degree. I would just appreciate a bit more advice on that, if that's okay.
Christiana, are you able to help with that one?
Yes, I could chip in something. So there's a scheme that we're about to roll out. It started about 2 years ago, which was initially funded by Health Education England, the paid work experience scheme. So we've had rollout for about 2 years now. And this year as well, we've advertised and we have recruited into those roles. So that's a good place to start, looking out for the paid work experience opportunities as they come up.
I don't mind chipping in as well, James.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think in terms of kind of just getting paid experience, but also to give you like a taster of the field, I think it'll be helpful applying for like HCA roles and support work roles in the different settings. I think, they don't ultimately look for whether you've got qualifications. I think they're looking for more about your qualities. If you've got qualities of empathy, team working, and just a genuine kind of commitment towards person-centered cares, which, if you can showcase that, then, they're more than likely to take you on. And you can get HCA roles in different settings. It can be in hospital settings, so that can be classed as clinical. You can do it in like care homes, or if you've got an interest in, say, like working, like in a forensic setting, then you could also apply to like secure care, thinking about like, say, Andrews. So there's a lot of kind of opportunities, and I think that will be the first step in kind of building on that foundation. And
I would say the voluntary sector as well. I think you touched on that, Mohammed, but
yeah.
Lots of roles within the voluntary sector. I guess drawing from Lauren's presentation about how she started with some of the youth work that she did. Do you want to give any feedback on that, Lauren?
Yeah, I mean, I guess any work with the community and with people is valuable experience. So, and I think touching on a couple of the other questions when people have asked about sort of how do you know what's relevant experience, I think if you can reflect on what you've done and reflect that against the person spec of the job, then that's valuable experience for you. But I would agree with Mohammed about the HCA and support worker roles as well, because then you can sort of work directly with people with mental health difficulties.
Can I jump in really quickly as well? Sorry, really.
Of course.
10 seconds. Just because I've done the career transition thing. One thing I did at one point in Singapore was I offered my previous career skills in order to get into a psychology clinic. I mean, I just sorted out their website for a little while, and they let me come in and sit in on some stuff. And it's one of those things, it just starts putting stuff on the CV. I didn't get to do anything properly clinical, but talking to psychologists, listening in on supervisions and stuff like that, it's all just stuff you can talk, like Lauren says, stuff you can reflect on, stuff you can add to that.
Yeah, it's all about human interaction, isn't it? And I guess if even in hospitality, as was mentioned earlier, and Mohammed reflected that, weaving that experience into how you can apply it to the role, interactions with people and good communication, that kind of thing. I'm conscious we're running slightly over time. I think we're okay to pick up another few questions. So we've got one left, I think now. Sinead.
Hello. I was just wondering about the bank positions. I'm actually on an honorary assistant psychologist placement at the minute. And this isn't something I'd heard of, so I just wanted to know a bit more about it.
Christiana?
Yes, okay. So this is something that we're currently working with temporary staffing solutions on. So we are currently trying to help them to put a system in place, or a structure in place where we can get the honorary assistant psychologist and the bank to register on TSS. But some of the challenges that they have highlighted is because it's a bit different for assistant psychologists, unlike other people like HCA, healthcare assistants, to immediately go on the roster and see a lot of job opportunities, or vacancy roles for them to take on, additional work for them to take on. So we're still developing this process with them, because what has been identified is that it's best if supervisors can utilize the block booking route. That way it will be easier for them to say, we need this student to work on this project for a certain period of time. So these are things that we're still currently trying to develop a process for, really.
Mohammed, did you want to come in there as well?
Well, I was going to move on to another question. So if you finish this one off, and then, yeah.
Okay, I think I think, has that answered the question okay?
Yeah, no, that's cool. Is that with the PPN, or was that with the trust itself then?
That would be with the trust.
The trust,
with
yes.
The trust. Okay. All right, thank you.
So what I wanted to do is, I think at 1:57, Sharon asked a question, and I'm just conscious that we probably skipped past it. And she's just asked, what are the greatest challenges or rewards in your role? So I thought it might be useful if we all kind of talk about it in our different settings, and it might give a kind of a taster for everybody in the audience. What do you think, James?
Okay, that sounds like a good plan. If we have that as the last kind of reflection for today. So if you want to make a start, Mohammed.
Yeah, that's fine. I guess in terms of, I always like to start off with the rewards. I think no 2 days are the same. And I think for me, through my own experiences, one of the rewarding part is knowing the difference that you can make in such a short amount of time. And I think that's down to, working in inpatient wards. You see people kind of coming in crisis, and then through kind of understanding, the big question for me is, when you understand the function of a behavior, what's the person trying to kind of communicate, or what's going on, and kind of seeing them from the beginning and the end. I think that's the most rewarding part for me, is just knowing the difference that you can make. In terms of kind of the challenges, I think one of the kind of the prominent challenges that I find, it can be navigating the MDT. We all have different kind of skill sets that we bring to a meeting, and we all have different kind of viewpoints. The medical team might have their opinion of what's going on. We as a psychology team might have a different opinion, and it's just kind of trying to navigate that kind of in a clinical way, really. I think that's been one of the challenges that I've found. And often, in order to work with this, I think formulation meetings can be quite helpful. But definitely, I think that's one of the challenges for me. Yeah, that's me done.
Thanks, Mohammed. I think Lauren's made a response in the chat. unless anyone wants to add anything else, I'd just like to give everyone, particularly our speakers, a massive thank you for their insights today. It's been really helpful. Thanks to you all as students for joining us, and please keep in touch through our email address and join up, join the network, and we'll push our communications out to you. Any further reflections that any of the speakers want to make in terms of their roles, or should we draw things to a close? I think we're done. So we'll let everyone go and grab a cuppa before your next part of the day. And thanks again to you all for joining us today.